So recently, Mike Israetel did another video in the sort of failing to fail reps in reserve saga, and I thought the video was excellent, very, very entertaining and well done, and I agree with the vast majority of his points. And I wasn't actually going to cover it because I thought I was just done. I had said everything I wanted to say. However, so many of you people are sending me this video, I sort of have to respond to it.
Technical failure is when you can no longer do another repetition with good technique. Or, more specifically, when you attempt to do a repetition with perfect technique and fail. If you grind the technique a little bit and get twerky and don't do good technique, that's not technical failure. If you hit failure after your technique sucks already, that's something else. That's more sort of better appropriated as absolute failure.
So he's talking about the various forms of failure, which I completely agree with. Concentric failure, where you can't lift the weight. Eccentric, where you can't even control the lowering. Absolute, where you can't lift at all, very sort of synonymous with concentric, and then technical, where you can't do another repetition in good form, with good technique. However, there's also another one, volitional failure. This is by far the most common form of failure. By far. If most people stop a set, I would say 95% of the time or more in the gym, and probably 99% of the time in commercial gyms, it is volitional failure. They stopped because they wanted to stop, because they simply gave up.
First type of failure is what you commonly see in folks that aren't used to the gym, newbies, and some individuals that just don't have kind of the psychology of really pushing themselves. Maybe genetically they do, but no one's ever sort of rooted them into using it.
So he's going to demonstrate a set, and this is pretty common. This is what you typically see in commercial gyms, where it looks kind of hard, but they definitely had more reps in the tank if they knew how to actually push themselves and how to give a better effort.
For them, failure, or in this video, what I'm going to be demonstrating is zero RIR, because we're doing a sort of squat exercise. I'm not getting pinned in this fucking machine and dying.
So why did he say that at all? Why did he include this in the video? I'm going to get stuck at the bottom and get pinned and fucking die. It's an excuse. It's a good excuse. It's one of the best excuses not to fail that I can think of. If anyone has ever failed a squat or a bench press, it's horrible. It's miserable. And from a risk to reward standpoint, it doesn't make any sense at all. Okay, you should always avoid failure on exercises where failure is a very bad situation. On something like an overhead press, the bar goes up, it stalls around the sticking point, you don't make it through the sticking point, you fail, but it's fine. You just put it back on the rack, or you reverse power clean it down, you put it down, and you're fine. You don't end up with the bar in your chest, you're not stuck in the bottom position of a squat or a leg press, and you're fine. On a lot of leg presses, you start from the bottom position. So if you fail, you just go up a little bit, back down to the bottom position, and you get out of the machine and you're fine. But in this type of leg press, there's no safeties in the bottom position. If you go up and you try to get through the sticking point and you just fail, you go back down, that's not a good situation. Okay, that is definitely potentially injurious, and you will want to avoid that at all costs. However, this inherently makes it more difficult to actually push to failure, or even close to failure. When I have people do bench presses, I usually recommend having slightly more reps in reserve, unless they are in a power rack and failing isn't that bad. If they don't have a spotter and they just have a normal bench with no power rack, you're going to want to keep more reps in reserve, just because failing is a very bad situation.
All right, so here's the first set. I'll do a little bit of a voiceover type of thing. And he's going down, controlling the eccentric, first rep. And as you can see, there's a little bit of effort involved. But he's not moving, very aggressively. He's not accelerating the weight. He's not really attacking the set. And, this is how the vast majority of people train. They essentially just go through the motions. Bar speed is still good. Effort is still fine. And he's done. Okay, so that's very, very common to see.
So, that was it. Zero RIR, where because I'm just not trying that hard, I may think it's zero RIR, but really there's not a lot of effort going on.
This is where reps in reserve, RPE, failure training, this whole thing gets very, very blurry, because to this beginner, this is genuinely 0 reps in reserve. Whereas a more sort of hardcore athlete, they see this and they're like, shit, I had half a dozen or 10 more reps in the tank. But to that beginner, that might genuinely be 0 reps in reserve. Like, they could not have gotten another rep with their current mental situation.
It happens when Coach Greg talks about most people don't train hard enough. He's got a point there, because a lot of people, I don't know if it's most, a ton of people stop. For me, was about the 6 reps. Tough, shit is definitely pushing back, reps are slowing down, but god damn it, if I focused, I could get some more.
This was actually pretty cool to see. For those of you who don't know, Greg Doucette has the train harder than last time type of thing, and Mike Israetel is sort of a more nuanced type of approach, and they had a somewhat heated debate a while back. So this was kind of cool for him to admit, okay, for most people, or at least a lot of people, train harder than last time is a pretty decent rule of thumb. And I would say, yeah, for most people, they almost certainly should train harder in order to get more results. And I've done numerous videos about this in the past, and for most people, simply putting more effort into their training is the single greatest thing that will give them better results. And this is actually probably the single greatest benefit of the reps in reserve system. It forces people to actually think about how close they are to failure. And that includes Mike. I'm sure Mike has been thinking about failure a lot more since he has been criticized. And that's true of basically any fitness influencer who uses the reps in reserve system. By getting this feedback from other people, it can help. Sometimes the internet is wrong, but sometimes it's right too.
All right, here's the second set, and this is how he advocates training the vast majority of the time. The rep speed is very consistent, very controlled, and this is a great way to stimulate hypertrophy. And this is how he does most of his sets, and I actually agree. I actually think most of your sets should be controlled, not to failure, not all out. Nowhere have I said that you need to train to failure, or that it is necessary to train to failure, or even that it is optimal to train to failure. I am simply saying that a set like this is not really 0 reps in reserve. You can see a slight slowing there, and he racks it. But he had more reps in the tank, okay? You don't slow half a second, and then you're done.
And that's like, oh, 1 rep in reserve, 0 reps in reserve. Very tough.
So I wanted to take this opportunity to address a couple of points that I have seen that tend to try to dismiss bar speed with regards to failure. The first is fiber type. I've seen this a few times, and it is not necessarily a great predictor of bar speed and failure. There's really no evidence for that whatsoever. A lot of this is looking at Olympic weightlifters, seeing that they don't grind their reps, and then assuming they don't grind their reps because they are fast twitch. And I think this is mostly because they are training to be explosive. Therefore, they typically avoid the grindy reps because they're just not getting very much out of it. And again, he's right. From a stimulus to fatigue ratio standpoint, especially if you're training to be explosive, it doesn't really make any sense at all to do grinding reps. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's because they are fast twitch. It makes sense. It's logical. It's a good assumption, but it might not be correct. Another assumption is that reps at 80% of 1 rep max can be predicted by fiber type. But the recent study found that only 14% of the variation in reps at 80% can actually be predicted by fiber type. 14%. If you ask most people on the street, like, so how many reps you get is dependent on fiber type, right? So what do you think it actually predicts? They'd be like, yeah, maybe 70, 80%, oh, 90%. Like, of course, it's just your fiber type. No, 14%. And reps is not the same as rep speed. But it just shows that fiber type isn't as good of a predictor of many things as you might think. Plus, most people are pretty normal in terms of fiber type composition anyway. Even bodybuilders, even powerlifters, they don't have any kind of like special super fast twitch type of situation in most cases. They are usually average. And especially because Mike trains with very, very high volumes, you would not expect him to be fast twitch anyway. I mean, he might be, but that's not really evidence for not being able to grind. The second argument is that it is dependent on the exercise involved. And I 100% agree. Something like a row, often the most difficult part is at the very top, because just mechanically you're at the biggest disadvantage, and especially getting that scapular retraction, it is much more difficult than this first part or the mid-range. So you'll see someone go to failure on pull downs, and this will be easy, and it gets more and more difficult, and they might hit failure just because they can't get that last little part of the range of motion. But often, they don't really try in that last part of the range of motion. They just go here, and then they're like, oh, I can't get it, and so they fail. I see this all the time. People need to learn to actually focus on the most difficult part of the range of motion, because the easy part is easy. You're not getting very much out of that anyway. It's the most difficult part where you get the most benefit. Then you have exercises where the most difficult part is in the middle of the range of motion. So most people fail their bench press. They have a sticking point in the middle part of the range of motion. Top's relatively easy. The chest is easy as well. You get a nice spring from actually the chest, and the end is easy as well. But the middle is where it is difficult. Same thing for a squat. You'll almost never see someone fail a squat in the last few inches of the range of motion. Same thing with the bottom. Usually people can get at least moving out of the hole. It's that middle part that is difficult. And usually these exercises have a very, very predictable reduction in bar speed. You get past the sticking point, past the sticking point, past the sticking point, kind of past the sticking point. You get just past the sticking point and the bar keeps going. You get to the sticking point, it's a lot slower, it's a grindy rep, and you get it up. And then the next rep, you don't quite get it past where you can get it up, and you fail. But that degradation in rep speed is quite predictable for the vast majority of people, regardless of fiber type. Now, the third type of strength curve, there's actually a few others. It's a topic that completely fascinates me, and I'll do a full video 100% for sure at a later date. But the third type is something like a sumo deadlift, where for most people, the most difficult part is at the very start of the range of motion. And this results in the exercise usually being very, very grindable, if you will, if you at least stick with it. If you don't give it an honest effort, it'll just stick to the floor and you're done. But sometimes if you just keep pulling on that goddamn bar, it doesn't seem like it's going to move, and then you suddenly find the right position and it freaking flies up. You do a second rep, it flies up again. A third rep, again, and you can just keep going even if you thought you were like extremely close to failure. I've done 10 reps at 90% of my 1 rep max. My 1 rep max is 205 kilos in the deadlift. I've done 10 reps at 180 kilos, which to a calculator is ridiculous. You look at someone like Steffi Cohen, it looks like it's a 1 rep max, and then she does 2 more reps with the same weight if she just sticks with it. This is mentally extremely difficult. Same thing with Dan Green. He'll pull 5, 6, 7, 8 singles at RPE 10, and he just keeps going. You see him pull the first one, and you're like, damn, that's an all-out effort. Maybe he has 1 more if he's lucky. And he pulls like 6 more. Okay, so sometimes exercises are different, and the strength curve can really impact how much you can grind a lift.
And don't think that Dan Green can do this because he's slow twitch. No, he can do this because his nuts are the size of Jupiter, okay? Because he's willing not just to go to a dark place, but to actually push through a grindy rep. It is a skill. Another example was Steffi. If anyone saw this first rep, they would assume it's a 1 rep max. They would assume, all right, she doesn't have any more. Oh, there's a double. Wow, that one was actually faster. Oh, wow, she's still going. Damn, what the hell is wrong? That was supposed to be your 1 rep max. What do you mean she's still pulling? According to my calculations, she shouldn't be able to do this. She's ripping a hole in the space-time continuum by doing this. And this is tough. This is a brutal effort. You can see it is not easy at all, and it requires quite a bit of patience and focus to actually grind through the reps. But it's doable if you actually do it.
And you go to a place where you dip into a part of your animalistic, rage-prone psychology.
So I heard a story a while ago about one of the old-time Russian weightlifters from like the 70s or the 80s, and he was in and out of prison, just a super violent person, always getting in fights, just very, very aggressive. He used to go outside the police station and take a sledgehammer and just smash up the police cars and get in fights with the police, and just, I don't know if he murdered anyone, but he would just assault people all the fucking time. And I think he was an Olympic champion for the snatch and clean and jerk, the weightlifting. And some people just have a fucking animalistic side. I think we all have a little part of that. Like there's always some part of that in everyone, but some people definitely have more of that side of things.
But unfortunately, two other things: an unreal amount of fatigue and a pretty decent enhancement of the risk of injury.
And I do agree that you shouldn't train this way all the time. In fact, if you're a competitive athlete, you should probably save this for competition. Before this whole reps in reserve thing, I actually did a video titled The Soviet Rule, which talked about how there was a weightlifter, a famous weightlifter, who never trained on the nerve. That was his secret. He would never get hyped up or psyched up or jazzed or swifty, if you will, during training. He would keep his training as training, and he would save that for competition. And that was his secret. So I think most of the time, it doesn't really make sense to get psyched up for a given lift, especially if it is a 1 rep max.
You have two choices. As a hypertrophy trainee, you can either train like this never, or maybe once a mesocycle at most, on your final week when you're tired, you're beat up, you're sore.
Well, I'm not sure I 100% agree with this. If it's the end of a mesocycle, volume is high, fatigue is very high, you're about to deload, cortisol is high, you might be getting some joint pain, you're overall very disrupted, you might even have trouble sleeping, you're just overall messed up, you're just beaten up. That might not be a great time to use this kind of super high intensity, ultra high effort, go to the dark place type of thing. It might make sense, I understand the logic, you have a deload coming up which will dissipate the fatigue. You might want to get a little bit of extra stimulation just to put you over the edge and gain as much muscle as you can. But again, the risk of injury, you do have to balance those, and it might not be worth it for some people.
2 reps, mind you, all of the studies on failure training, most of the people don't go to the dark place. They go sometimes to place number 1, sometimes to place number 2, often number 2.
Yeah, so I would say most people have never gone to the dark place in their life, let alone in some study. And most sets in most scientific studies, I would bet, if I was a betting man, that most are closer to the first effort than the second effort. You have studies which say 45 sets per week to failure on squats is going to be optimal. Most people have never ever failed on squats in their life for even 1 set. They will rack the bar 2, 3, 5, 10 reps before they could. So I would say I don't put a lot of stock in a lot of volume or RIR studies, just because, as you can see from this video, it ranges from 6 to 10 to what you're about to see in terms of how many reps you actually get. So your mental state and your ability to actually push yourself varies quite a bit in terms of how many reps you'll actually get.
All right, so here is his top set, his dark place kind of set. He said he has some kind of like childhood stuff in Russia, and so he actually does swear in Russian and yell during the set. So I will keep the audio in on the background because I think that is relevant to the set. You can also look at his face, and you can tell there's more focus, more intensity during the set. And the rep speed is very, very consistent. You can see 1.3, 1.4, they are all basically the same tempo. So there's very little slowing down. There's no sticking point. You don't see him slow at any point during the rep. Technique is on point, very, very consistent. They're all 1.2 to 1.4 seconds. No slowing down at all. He's yelling, and the last rep, you can see him shuddering a little bit with his arm, but that last rep was still 1.3 seconds. So it was a great effort. It was fucking awesome to see this. And this actually gets me a little bit hyped hearing him swear in Russian. But was this 0 reps in reserve? I'm not entirely sold.
Well, that was fun. So, got 6 reps, feeling the weight. I got 10 reps when I was focused. And with psychotic childhood memories, I got me 15.
So again, this is the biggest criticism of reps in reserve. It is impossible to actually measure it because it is up to the individual. It's up to the person. You get 6, you get 10, you get 15. Depending on if you just don't give a shit about the training, you care a moderate amount, or you actually are attacking the fuck out of the set. So it really just depends on the person so much that science cannot really be used. Because if you can't measure something actually objectively, how can you use science? You can use weight on the bar. We know that to within like 0.1%. You can do sets. You can obviously measure that very easily. Reps, yes. But RIR? I don't think so. And that's where a lot of the studies on failure or RPE or reps in reserve, I don't put a lot of stock into. And I have an upcoming video on things that are wrong or problems in exercise science. This is a big one.
If I had to train like that all the time, I'd lower my volume a lot.
Yes. Yes, I absolutely agree. If you are pushing much harder per set, your volume will have to be lower. And, stimulus to fatigue ratio aside, what about stimulus to time ratio? Not everyone can go to the gym twice per day, 6 times per week, okay? Not everyone can spend 3 or 4 hours a day working out. If you want to actually work out more efficiently, a bit lower volume might make sense. Not 30 minutes per week, but, perhaps an hour per day or 45 minutes per day, okay? If you want more bang for your buck in terms of your time, yeah, you might want to push harder on each particular set so you don't have to do 20 to 25 sets per muscle group per workout. When I see 45 sets per muscle group per week in a study and it says it's to failure, to me, I find that hilarious because it is absolutely delusional of the authors to say it is actually to failure. There are plenty of people who do low volume programs or relatively low volume programs and get great results. I think Alec Onkari did a video where he talked about he did 2 or 3 sets of squats per week. Just one all-out 20-rep set. He grew muscle, he got stronger from like 2 or 3 sets per week. No other squats, okay? This wouldn't be possible if you look at a lot of the volume literature, okay? Because your intensity and your intensiveness and your ability to push yourself really freaking hard is a good driver of progress. If you can progress doing low volume, that's fine. You don't necessarily have to do higher volume. According to the literature you do, but in reality, you might not need to.
Every now and again, explore a little bit into that third to see if you're being realistic with your second. Because if without a whole lot extra arousal, you can get 2 or 3 reps, shit, then, you could be training a little harder without a ton of arousal.
Yeah, and that's a great point. So it's not just type 1, type 2, type 3, 6 reps, 10 reps, 15 reps. It's a continuum, okay? And you can inch a beginner from type 1 towards type 2. You don't have to go all the way all at once. And if you've been doing mostly type 2, you can get, a little bit jazzed, a little bit swifty before a set. You can say, all right, let's do this shit. Let's fucking get it. And you don't have to really, pound your chest and snort stuff before a set. You can just get a little bit focused, a little bit more focused than last time. You can train a little bit harder than last time, okay? That is fine up to a point. You don't have to go to that 15 rep zone. You can do 11 or 12 or 13. Find that area that is hard enough to get to your goals, but not so hard that you stagnate or go backwards, okay? So it takes some experimentation, and to a certain extent, it's going to be individual. If you don't have high goals, you don't have to train that hard. If you have high goals, you're probably going to have to train harder. But on the other hand, you also have to manage your fatigue. So there's a lot of factors at play, and it's not just type 1, type 2, type 3.
I'm going to go finish my workout. See you next time.
So all in all, it was great to see him training harder than last time, if you will. Great to see him pushing through a set, swearing in Russian. I know I'll use that imagery in my head later today in my workout. So, it was good to see that. I don't think he was quite at 0 reps in reserve, but does it really matter? Not really. And it also does show that the effort that you put into a set does make a big difference in how much volume that you can and should do. All right, that's all for this video. Like, subscribe, diddle that notification button, and I will see you all in the next video. Peace.